Hello, my art friend, and hello to you, Staci.
Hello, Farrin. How are you?
Good, good. I'm glad we get a chance to have this conversation. Our today artist and NAWA member is Staci Swider.
Long guy.
Staci is NAWA member, and she's textile designer, used to be textile designer, and she's known for her innovative design in which she create magical artwork, and she incorporate many different material into her artwork to create those magic. Staci, welcome to our conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Before we move on and you talk about yourself, I saw this picture and I saw this bracelet. Is that tattoo of
It's
Trisco?
both. It's both. There's a tattoo and there's a bracelet. The bracelet was designed by a Celtic artist, Robert Pyland,
Okay.
many, many years ago.
Okay.
And it's something I wear every single day. And about 12 years ago, I had a tattoo designed to complement the bracelet.
Okay. So you designed this Triskel, which is very interesting. And
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
teaching symbols. So as soon as I saw it, I thought, what? She have a Triskel, so it's okay. That's very actually meaningful, like, the existence, the cycle of love, life, the spirituality, the like 3 stage of life, and so on. All
Yes,
right.
all of that spirituality is really important into my artwork.
Yeah, I can see in your work, I saw. And I was really curious to know what all this artwork and all these symbols means within your work. But before we go into your artwork, I'd like to talk about your background and who are you and how you became interested in art and what type of art you're doing.
Well, so 47 lifetimes ago, I went to school to be a fabric designer. And I worked in the home furnishings industry. And then, I had children and I was commuting, 2 hours each way up to New York. And I had babies at home. And I was like, I think I need a little bit more than, 4 or 5 hours commuting every day. And I'd like to spend some time with my children. So I left that industry in pursuit of motherhood mostly. And during that time was when I started painting artwork and making art rather than, design work, which was very different. And my Slavic background, when I was growing up, I had spent a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandmother, she sewed all of the time, and we painted on Easter eggs during the springtime, making pasanki eggs, and in church there was all of this rich design that I was always surrounded by on Sunday morning when we would go to mass. And so I made a conscious decision to embrace all of that and try to incorporate it into my work. And that's more or less how I got where I am, now.
So are you still designing textile or you just primary?
No, I use a lot of textiles in my paintings.
Okay.
But I'm not designing fabric per se any longer.
Okay. All right. I see in your work that it has some sorts of textile or fabric incorporated into your work.
Yes, in fact,
Yeah,
go
I mean,
ahead.
so what type of art you known with, or what's your primary type of artwork you make?
It's interesting. I keep going back and forth debating myself how I label my work. The easy answer would be to say mixed media. But you know, recently I've been reading a lot of debate on what that it actually means and how that's defined. I know that in the NAWA category genres, I am classified as a collage artist.
Okay.
So, but I don't know that I fit into the traditional sense of what collage is. I do so much back and forth between assembling things together and then adjusting them over top of what I've assembled. It's hard to say where the painting ends and the collage begins, and then back to painting again, and then there's lots of sewing and stitching, and then I cut them apart and then I reassemble them into new pieces. It's just sort of this very amorphous process.
Yeah, so it's in a sense, it's just in a brighter categories. You are mixed media artist.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so like for example, this piece we're seeing right now here, is this some of your earlier work or some of your newer work?
This is newer. This is within the last 2 years.
Okay.
This piece here.
Are you started with this type of like mixed media as an artist from the beginning, or this is something you do recently?
This is more recent, really. This releasing things off of the stretchers, off of the canvas, going for a more organic, edge, really embracing the idea of movement within the piece, where it actually looks like it could be moving on the wall. That's something that's really important to me. Sort of the piece looks like it has a sense of freedom to it.
So what is included in this piece? Which part is painting? And which of
all
which
right.
part are the
So
stitches?
in
It's really hard to, it's all became one very like beautifully. So they kind of mingling each media really nice. But I know since you said you do use mixed media, fabric painting and stitches. So can you break down, for example, this painting?
Sure.
Tell us.
So this piece is within the actual boat shape. There is fabric. It's also that I sewed on a sewing machine. I stitched it on a machine. I also combined it with fabric, with paper from old paintings that I had. I took some vintage wallpaper and painted over that to create kind of that, there's a Prussian blue and a umber toned paper that gets used around the outside of this piece, as well as the decoration that goes around the upper edge of that boat. So that was painted vintage wallpaper. The pink is some fabric. Actually, I cannot get that harsh pink in paint and have it be light fast. So I've been collecting bits and pieces of like 1970s polyester in fuchsia and and fluorescent pink to use in my work. So then let's see, the actual where it looks like there's kind of a stitched white pattern around the background, those flowers, I painted that to look like stitching.
Okay.
And then in the border that looks like an old like a crocheted or a quilt background, that is, it's got yarn. It's also where I drew on it with an oil paint stick, and then in the middle of those squares is actually old bottle caps that are sewn on with yarn.
I can see that really.
Yeah, it's hard to see
really
them in the photograph. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this is a piece you have to see it in person because there are so many things incorporated. And then the flower, these are the stitches, right? I mean, you did with the
So those look like stitches, but I actually painted them.
Oh,
So they're
okay.
teeny
Oh,
tiny little hatch marks with a brush
oh, I'm sure it
to
took a long
simulate the
time.
idea of stitching.
Okay, so it took some sure long time to just, it's like a dot dot. Okay.
Yes, but
Uh,
it was a lot faster than actually sewing it by hand. So
are these on fabric, right?
this one is on, I believe it's all mounted on canvas,
Okay.
like a traditional uh, gessoed canvas, and then it's layered up with layers of paint, more canvas, paper.
Okay. So, Miss, are these frame or like, they are not stretch, right? I mean, this is just you hang them just without frame or without any, how you mount this, your painting.
That's been an ongoing challenge trying to figure out the best method. So
Okay.
what I've settled on recently is to attach like plastic rings onto the back of the work, and then they mount onto like two nails on the wall, and
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
sit on there. Recently I've seen some artists using magnets that are
Okay.
embedded into the back of the work. I'm very curious about experimenting with that to see if
Yeah.
I could make that work.
Yeah. I saw actually an artist in Instagram who had several magnets on the wall and he just put them like
Yeah.
very interesting, but um how you attach those magnet in the wall, I had it like didn't explain it. So I'm sure, but if you search and watch some video, you will get some idea. He also work, I think, more with in mixed media and textile and fabric in his work. That's the reason he used those magnet. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like my assumption was you also probably use some kind of magnet thing for.
Not yet.
That's
Maybe.
it.
Maybe in the
Maybe, yeah.
future.
Yeah, we learn from each other. So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. So this is again, I mean, the same thing. Is this a boat again? Are
Yes.
you, yeah.
And in my mind, vessels, water vessels are really important to me. And I have this whole narrative. I call them soul sleds.
Okay.
And it's based on the idea of a boat or a canoe. But in my internal dialogue, it's a vessel where, like, your soul's guardian, or you could think of it as your guardian angel, or but the entity that is in charge of kind of keeping your life on track and watching out for you. This is their place where they can go and relax when your life is humming along fine, but also where they carry your baggage, because I figure that's kind of a heavy burden. And so
Yes.
this is like, I imagine these soul sleds are, out there somewhere around us in the ether. And it just helps our soul's guardian take care of us.
Yeah. So this is again on canvas, and I think, if I see it correctly, you paint this two piece separately and somehow joined it, and then this is another piece that been attached the boat, right?
Yeah, so a lot of times what I will do is take old canvases or papers and I sew them together to make a larger base to work on. And then this particular vessel, I actually had to work. It's really heavily embroidered and beaded. There's all of those little flowers and dots that you see on there are beads and sequins,
Yeah.
that are attached. And so it's painted, sewn, embroidered, embellished, and then all of that was attached to the base fabric or canvas. And then, like, the little bits that are hanging off on the bottom, those are actually paper and embroidered with a heavy wool yarn. And then they also have the bottle caps sewn onto them
Okay.
the black birds in this piece are embellished with black sequins and gold thread.
So is this like the idea is like a vessel within a vessel, like a vehicle, like you have a boat within another source of transportation. Those are wheel, right? Which is
they could be wheels. I mean, really, they're really up for interpretation. I loved the idea of just this like as if it was a banner, you know, hanging. And if the wind were to catch it and it had movement, that those pieces on the bottom, you know, they kind of look like wheels. They could be interpreted as the down part in a swell of a wave, for instance.
yeah.
Or just something to activate, you know, like if if it was like a banner and the wind caught it, something to excite the air movement
Yeah, okay.
around.
So I mean, I see like, you know, the background, it's like two pieces, right? Which is you said you
Mhm.
sew it together. So is it a reason for the shape of it? I mean, for me, when I saw this painting, I saw a truck,
Oh yeah.
okay, and within
Uh-huh.
a truck, a boat.
Okay.
You know, this is like
So
my
yeah.
observation. So I
So
think like you did it intentionally for everybody to see, like, you
no,
know, observe the way they
no.
want.
In fact, the shape of it, you know, I will randomly grab things that I feel like the sizes and the shapes complement each other. And then I attach them. And I do like a wonky edge, I'm not going to lie. And it's really more of an aesthetic on these pieces. It's an aesthetic decision for me how the pieces are attached together. Like there's really no, I don't really have an agenda in mind when I get started. They kind of grow very, very organically. I mean, to be honest, whatever's going on, this painting probably, you know, had 3 lifetimes before it ended up getting put together in this, you know, current fashion.
Yeah. Okay, so you're giving a new life,
Yeah,
right? New
yeah,
purpose to different by using like almost everyday object, as you mentioned it in your statement.
yeah. This particular piece, now actually, I can tell you that this one is made up of 2 different pieces. Back in 2021, 2022, when the whole invasion of Ukraine happened,
Yeah.
I had been reading about stories of children, you know, being, you know, forced to leave their home and leaving their villages, leaving their cities, and being relocated. And there was something really lonely and, you know, terrifying about the idea of, you know, I felt that what that must have been like. So I created the vessel. I started to create this painting that was going to be, you know, me giving them protection on their journey. And so I created, but underneath all of these figures here was a completely different painting of flowers. Probably they were sunflowers or something at the time. And I had this other small piece started on my wall of these abstract figures. And somebody was in my studio visiting, and we were talking, and all of a sudden I looked from one end of my wall where the little piece was to the other one at the bottom. And I was like, hang on a second. And I walked over and I grabbed it off of the wall, and I went down, you know, 20 feet down the wall, and I tacked it onto over top of the sunflowers and was like, oh, okay, there we go. That's what that painting wants to be about. And so I moved the figures and actually put them in the boat, in the, you know, in the soul sled,
Yeah.
and sewed it on there to, and that's how this piece came about.
Yeah. Sometimes idea just come in a second, you know, you create things and you live it for years to come, and in a sudden something, someone inspired, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
never know.
You never know, right? I mean, the background, it's fabric, right? The velvet in the
So
background.
the background on this one is canvas.
Okay.
It was a traditional piece of canvas. You can actually see in the corners where it's notched out.
Okay.
When I released it from the stretcher bars, that is how the how it's mitered around the corners. And so that's, and I was like, oh, I love that. You know, you can actually get a sense of where it used to be.
Yeah.
So this was canvas, and it does have some paper probably collaged on there, but I drew the that pattern was inspired by some different wallpaper that I have a piece of in my studio that I really like.
Okay.
So I just recreated the pattern using paint and drawing materials and oil paint sticks
Yeah.
into that background.
Right. So this is the third artwork we're looking, and you have boat on it. Why boat?
It's the soul sleds.
Okay.
So
All right.
they're all, it's the idea of this this vessel that is there to, you know, help. It's a
Yes.
safe space.
Okay. So this is like a safe space for these kids
Exactly.
to help
Exactly.
you your journey. Okay. Makes sense.
This piece I did after you know, just another day in America, the shooting in Uvalde and
Okay.
all the children. I create this piece is there's all the little, it's dedicated to all of the souls who have sadly moved
Yes.
on too soon. I'm trying not to get choked up because whenever I talk about this piece, it
I
always
know it's like, you know, always.
it's very meaningful for me. And so there's a figure in the background who I think of as the storyteller, this dark figure. It's made out of old Hungarian embroidered silk. And then it's actually embroidered, sewn onto the painted surface of the canvas. There's a lot of collage in this piece. And then the piece at the bottom is all sewn. It's paper and fabric that's then sewn on my sewing machine. And so I was imagining that this figure is kind of, you know, gathering the souls to them, to, you know, like story time.
Exactly. Wow. So the background you painted like this red you know, background, you paint that on the canvas, and then you
Yes.
attach each piece, or you sew each piece separately, like those little figures.
Okay, so on this one, the background was canvas and paper, and then I collaged a lot of paper and other fabrics and items onto that background is collaged. And then I teased out the figures from what was underneath, and then painted out what wasn't necessary and turned that into the red background.
Yeah.
And then the pieces across the bottom were created separately and then sewn onto the bottom of the composition.
Or then you sew two pieces together. Okay, it makes sense. Very actually interesting piece, and so meaningful, and even the choice of color, it actually helped to tell the story.
Yes.
And narrowed it there in a sense. Very interesting, very actually touching piece, I should say.
Thank you. This piece is very recent. This piece was created this past spring. I spent a month in Ireland painting in February. And while I was there, my friend and I came across a rookery, and it was nesting season. So they were building nests in this stand of trees in this field, and there were just hundreds of blackbirds or rooks flying and carrying sticks and building nests and screaming at each other, and it was amazing. I was transfixed.
Yeah.
And so this piece was inspired by that experience, that day, spent with the birds. And then the choice of, sometimes I'll use scraps of Oriental rugs and things to anchor my artwork. That's something I started doing recently. I like the weight that it adds visually. I like the idea that, rugs are normally on the floor, anchoring our space where we live. And so I'm really into this idea right now of having them anchoring my paintings, and they add a certain depth and earthiness to my work that I'm really enjoying right now.
Okay.
And experimenting with.
So to my interpretation of this work, so the bird and the nest which they're building, and the carpet or the rocks, which is symbolize home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Home.
Yes.
So the idea here, you connecting that home with this home, like, carpet.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. And then bird, and which they building their nest. So because when you see a rug, a carpet, automatically you feel home, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's makes sense. I mean, when I saw this work, I try to make sense of it, right? I always try looking for meaning,
Right.
being obsessed with symbols. And I try to understand it. But now you explain, okay, you saw all this nest, right? Building the nest and the carpet. So it has a story, very beautiful story in a sense.
Thank you.
The part with bird are all painting, right? This is
Yeah, they are collaged and painted, and I think there's a little bit of fabric in some of those. Those are mostly collaged and then drawn and painted over top of them.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it make definitely sense, right? Bird and home, chief fruits, but to me, it's home.
Yes. There was a quote, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly. A lot of times when I'm naming my pieces, I will go to Thoreau and I'll start reading quotes of his writings. And sometimes I'll find a turn of phrase that I'll just find interesting. So I have lists of them that I keep on my phone of, just phrases or word combinations. And I can't remember exactly what this one was, but it was something about the idea of nesting and coming home and, providing, someone providing for someone else. Yeah. I can't remember exactly what it was.
It's explained it beautifully, the work itself. It's really well done and meaningful in a sense.
Thank you.
Here and carry.
So again, the blackbirds, the rooks, the whole corvid species, I really resonate with me. They're tied in mythology and folklore. They're closely tied to the idea of aging and crone, as well as creativity. So, and personally, as I'll be 60, in a couple of months next year. So I'm really feeling the whole aging and how do I, what do I want to be remembered for later when I'm gone, in 30 or 40 years? And And so this whole idea of these blackbirds is sort of embodying, and this is when I have really found my true, creative soul and my creative voice in this later period of my life. So the blackbirds kind of symbolize that for me, kind of this stage of life I find myself in, and really embracing it.
Yeah. And how about the boat and that figure sitting? Is that representing you?
Yeah, basically, it's kind of a self-portrait in a sense. This is me, in my vessel, surrounded by all of these, creative voices that came before me. My maternal ancestors, so to speak.
Yeah. And I see this piece has a border.
Yes.
It's finished.
Mm-hmm.
Rounded. Is it a reason some of your work, like previously we saw, like for example, they are not finished or symmetrical,
Right.
but this one, it's more symmetrical and we see finish.
I sometimes some of the pieces feel like they call for that little extra wobble around the outside edge. Sometimes I feel like that if I were to contain them too much, that I'm sort of I'm reducing their energy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now this piece is from a year and a half ago, maybe, not quite 2 years ago. So it's probably in this current body of work that I'm doing, it's a little bit earlier. So I was also more apt to finish these things. And this is not to say that I don't go back later and take some of the other pieces that are not hemmed out like this one is. This has a blanket stitch in red wool around the outside, and that I might go back and decide to add something like that.
Okay, so this is like okay, so it's in a sense, this is about something being already settled down.
Yes.
And some of your work are the one you still like like this one is about you, the previous one, and it's representing you as a person who already settled down and your life shaped and is secure, and you are within something that already been made for you.
Yes. And this piece with the two birds in it, there's so much energy visually in this painting that if I were to add some kind of a border around it, a hem around it, I think that it would fight, in my mind, I would feel like I was fighting what was going on the inside.
Yeah. All right. I mean, it makes sense the way you describe it. It's just
this piece was also inspired by the rookery in Ireland.
And so what represent in this one? So that was about nesting, and this is like trees and flowers and all kind of landscape element within it.
Yes. Yeah, this was more of just a direct interpretation of the location where the rookery was or is. And actually the flowers on the bottom had started out as a study of some stained glass windows that I had seen in a church there. By a very famous stained glass artist, and I wish I hadn't said that because now I can't remember his name. Henry something. But anyway, and but so as I was working on the painting, the flowers from the stained glass windows I thought would be a nice addition into where the rock wall of the rookery was. And then I added the bunting on the bottom are crocheted out of wool.
Okay. So and what are this round element here? What this represent?
It's sometimes that shape to me, I use a lot. They remind me of hay bales when hay gets rolled up for winter fodder.
Yeah.
And they're in big round
Yeah.
pieces. So it was kind of that. It was a little bit a nod to the rolling hills. It could have been, you know, at the movement. There on that day there were hundreds of birds moving. So,
yeah, it's like a sense of harvest and like
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay. And
This piece, I did while I was in Ireland, actually. It's created on cardboard and paper, and then and it has some lace and some old linen embroidery stitched into the vessel, but then on the bottom of it is a piece of vintage lace. Actually, there's actually 2 or 3 pieces of lace attached onto the bottom to create the pennant or the piece that's hanging from it. It was kind of a pivotal piece for me. This was the first time that I started adding kind of these overt textile references onto my paintings. And it was really liberating for me to do that.
Are this canvas the main
No,
shape?
this one's on paper and cardboard.
Okay. Okay, and then the rest been collaged into that.
Yes.
And then what's the idea? Again, I see this boat.
We had gone to visit some holy sites in Ireland the weekend before. We had gone to visit St. Bridget's Well. And it was the Feast of St. Bridget that week. So that was really playing in my mind. And so this piece was really, the idea was about at St. Bridget's Well, there's a in the ground is there's the water that comes, it bubbles up out of the ground into like a trough.
Yeah.
Like a bowl that's set in the cement in the ground there. And so this was it was reference for that.
Okay. Oh, interesting. And then the blackish background is reference to that, like, you know, to that ground, to that fountain or whatever that war came, right?
Yes, I like a strong contrast in my work. My go-to color palette overall would be black, white, red, and some kind of a neutral.
Yeah.
So I'm often, you know, just playing around with using, you know, dark space and light space visually.
Yeah.
But also, you know, there's darkness, and it could be, it's very grounding. It's very rooted. It's sort of the sub, you know, if you think in terms of the duality of, you know, as above, so below, that whole idea. I like that, you know, and then you have the lightness, the white, the purity of the well where the water's coming out.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of hermetism. As below, so above. Yeah. Wow, I mean, this was a piece I couldn't understand what the material you use, and because I don't have the material. Is this frame?
Yes. So, and I apologize for including the frame, but it's mounted inside a shadow box.
No, that's actually a really smart way, because then we know how you display it. So it's like,
while I was in Ireland, I started experimenting with taking the idea of the soul sleds and creating them in 3D.
okay.
So I start with my particular method, which I have really just invented through trial and error is I start with wire and I bend the wire and I create my shape and I paint that. So I tint it so it's not white. And then I start sewing lightweight fabrics onto it and weaving yarn in and out of the metal frame. And then I start attaching, yarn and fabric and sometimes pieces of paper onto that base to kind of for embellishment.
Okay, so the main is metal that been shaped, and then you incorporate fabric and yarn and etc.
Yes, exactly.
All right, and then I mountain it. And whether this is to just hold it within your frame. I mean, it's the idea of this thread.
Yeah, red thread is I will always default to red thread if given a chance. In growing up, that was something I always associated with my grandmother and the Ukrainian and Slavic textiles that were around the house. They were always embroidered in red thread. And and because I read later, because where it's placed on the shirts, for instance, and on the body, it's protection.
Yes.
And it's to protect your life force, and it represents, like your blood and all of that, your energy. So I love to use red thread in my work. It's a consistent design element that I fall back to often.
All right, it makes sense, right? Also I see you, you're holding your vessel or your boat with those red thread, which is again symbolize that protection you mentioned.
Exactly. Again, another vessel done in 3D. This was myself and 3 of my friends. My friend Leslie Hamrick, another artist, and I went to Ireland in February. And then we have 2 friends, Susan Irish and Laura Hitchcock, who are also both NAWA members, were there in March. And the 4 of us have a group we call The Well. And it's a friend group where you can deposit things into the well to support each other, but you can also withdraw from the well. So if one of us is having trouble, or if we need a critique, or if we want to know how to do something, or somebody's just having a bad day and needs a boost, they'll let the other 3 know, and everybody jumps in and like, yeah, you got this, you can do it. So we get together either in person or via Zoom every couple of weeks. And so when we knew that the 4 of us were going to be in Ireland, essentially one right after the other, we decided to have an exhibit when we came home. So we had an art exhibit of the work that we did while we were doing our residencies. That was up this past summer.
Yeah.
And so this was a piece I did at the last minute, literally like 2 days before the show opened. I'm like, oh my God, I need to create something about the 4 of us. So this was what it was.
So these are the 4 of you represented here, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the 4 of us in our vessel.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. And then what are these white? Are these your arms?
Those are the arms.
Looking toward the sky, or?
Yes. So we're sort of, joyous and dancing.
Okay, dancing or joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, I think, thank you, Staci. Very interesting work. And to be honest, I was really curious to learn more about them, because when you see it and when you explain, it's quite different interpretation for that. And Staci has a beautiful website with really actually easy to navigate and, see more of her artwork. Staci, just to end the conversation, I wish we had more time to talk, but do you have any advice or last word for our fellow artists today?
The best advice I was ever given, that I tell any student that ever crosses my path or an artist is you need to work every single day. And that if you don't follow your, like, you can't complain about your work unless you've spent enough time creating it. And by spending that much time creating your work, inevitably you will find your own voice. You know, don't get distracted by everything you see on Instagram.
That's true. That's true. And life is full of distraction. Thank you very much, Staci. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
it.
Farrin.
Is that
I
the
really
one behind
appreciate
you
it.
also one of your work?
Ma'am?
The one behind you is one of your work?
It is, yeah. This is from 2019, I think. It was about my children and
Okay.
all of their ancestors who've passed away, their grandparents. It was shortly after my dad passed away.
Oh,
So I
wow.
included my 2 children and then all of their relatives who are no longer with us.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Staci.
Sure. Bye.